Welcome to the Married People Podcast, where we help you make marriage real, fun, and simple. Each week, we have honest conversations about one simple thing that can make your marriage better. Because when your marriage is better, everything's better. I'm CJ, and I'm thrilled to be joined by our resident newlywed, Afton.
Hi.
And our 22-year marriage veteran. He's an author, speaker, and the director of marriedpeople.org, Ted Lowe.
Hey, everybody.
And we have a very special guest with us.
The most special guest.
Nancie Lowe, Ted's wife.
Woohoo! Holla! Hello.
And today on the Married People Podcast, we are asking the question and discussing the question, how do I protect my marriage from parenting? So, Ted, you and Nancie have been married over 20 years, and you've been working with married couples for over 16 years, and you have 3 kids. 18, 15, and 12. So that's a lot of life in those 20 years so far. And so I think this is going to be a great conversation to jump into.
And I am really happy that we're having a podcast specifically on parenting, like parenting your kids, because I feel like whenever I talk to Ted and Nancie about their kids, it's like, you don't really come across many parents that are really real about raising kids. And I'm really excited about it because I feel like they're not trying to paint some perfect, beautiful picture of parenthood, because it's hard and it's real. And so I'm excited to hear what they have to say.
That's great. That's great.
Yeah, and Afton, I'm glad you're here today, too, because I know as a stepmom, there's different dynamics there. I'm so glad that you're part of this conversation. And also, CJ, you work with high school students, so you hear that about mom and dad. And so, we were in youth ministry for a long time, too. And so you see how important that marriage is to kids. So if we were just having a podcast about, hey, what's the best thing you can do for your kids, we would talk about this whole idea of making sure you're on the same page as parenting.
Yeah.
But I say that we've got to protect our marriage from parenting, because it can be very challenging. I mean, studies show that parenting is really tough on marriage.
Yeah.
Amen. I believe it.
You believe it?
So let's just start getting into it here. So why is parenting so tough on marriage? I know it's almost obvious that there's just a lot with it, but is there more to it than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we bring in family of origin, things you parent differently. My mom passed away when I was 10, so I was raised by my dad for a lot of that, and so that brings a lot of dynamics. And I always say I was raised by people that shouldn't have been raising me, which always kind of felt weird, and probably felt even weirder to them. So you bring in all that dynamic, and then
my parents are still together, but I was definitely primarily parented by my mom. Like my dad was not as involved, so it's very different because I had a dominant mom and you just had your dad. So it's been an interesting parenting journey for us.
And I think what's interesting is because I'm young and I just became a parent suddenly and married suddenly, became a parent and married at the same time, actually. So, because when you become a step parent, it's all at once, and I think for me, what was the hardest thing was not the marriage thing. It was kind of the kid thing, but then realizing how that impacts one another. I mean, even when you come home from work and it's not just the two of you, like you come home from work and there's all these other dynamics at play just because there's these other human beings in your house, and kind of how that impacts your relationship with your spouse.
And you are walking into a situation with a stepson, and then Nancie, Ted, you're talking about your families of origin and how you guys were raised. So why do those things make marriage more challenging with those backgrounds?
Well, I think that we just see how to parent often. I think a lot of people resonate with this differently. We see a situation and we say, I feel like we need to deal with it this way. Or we see a situation and neither one of you knows what to do about it.
Yeah.
And then so you start talking towards each other, and it's just really frustrating. So two frustrated people talking can end up, in a lot of frustrating moments. I mean, we laugh at our house that I'm grace and she's truth, and on bad days I'm in denial and she's critical. And so we're very different in that way. What would you say?
I think the hard part about parenting, one, is that you wake up every day going, oh, goodness, I do not know what I'm doing. But it just requires so much discussion and back and forth effort and decisions. It's not like, oh, okay, we're done. No, it's a new day and it's a whole new discussion or a whole new, it just is rich for chaos and hard conversations. And I mean, there's great joy, but I think the thing that it can do to a marriage is that it just is a constant discussion and a give and take and a figuring out that it just never ends.
As different as we are, I think we've actually done pretty well in the parenting space.
Oh, I agree.
Oddly enough, and I think part of it is because we're both pretty stubborn and strong-willed that with our kids that this is what's going to happen, and so we'll kind of talk about what's going to happen, and then we'll push forward. And so the bad news with us is we're stubborn with our kids, but we tend to be on the same page. But it's all about getting on the same page to know what to be stubborn about, or here's the rule, and here's what you're going to do.
So, Ted, Nancie, give us an example of what that looks like as far as getting on the same page and that sort of thing.
I was thinking about this, that we were going to be talking about this, and I think there are areas where you just know more. You've got more skin in the game. For instance, this is my example, like school. Like, I don't think Ted really knows what's going on at school. Do you?
Not as much as you.
No. And I care really hard about what's going on at school in terms of grades and all. And so I think you defer to me to go, I don't really have a super opinion. I may not agree with what she thinks, but she cares harder. And so
it's kind of your area.
Yeah. And I would say, like, now that we have older kids, like, definitely cars and driving and all that goes into that is definitely your domain. And I may not agree, or I may have a different opinion, but I definitely think I'm going to defer to you on this. So I think it's learning to do that, of going, oh, she really cares about this for some reason. Whether his clothes matter to her, and I don't care, but I'll go with it.
So what about when there's something that you both care a whole lot about? What does that
woe
look like?
unto those children if we both really care.
Yep.
Because the hammer's coming down. No,
Well, I think one of the things we've learned is even if it's not our area, we have to have each other's back.
yes.
So we got an email last night.
Fresh.
This is super fresh.
Fresh examples.
Fresh example. Oh, we've always got fresh examples.
Any given day.
Any given day. So we get an email from one of our children, so we'll keep anonymous as that, from a teacher that says he's choosing not to do his work. Sleeping, phone was supposed to be put away, phone was not away. And so he will do this sporadically every couple of years, just some really random, obscure behavior that we have to deal with. And so Nancie, she was going to pick up Teddy, and then she sent me our daughter, and sends me a text and said, you need to read this email I just sent you from the Spanish teacher. And so I go through that, and I was like, oh, okay.
And was your initial thought like, oh, Nancie's going to be so livid?
Boy, I thought, you better warn that boy to get in the basement because a tornado is coming, baby.
Because if it had just been you.
No, I would have been frustrated too. Like that, for me, I'm more than school performance, I'm more about obedience and respect.
Right.
So when I see that the teacher said, I requested this and he did this, then so I'm on
That's
fire.
what's under your skin.
So I've got that under my skin, and she's got that under her skin.
Plus the school aspect of,
Absolutely.
And so this child is now homeless.
This child is...
Well, he is phoneless, video gameless, and has a bedtime. So he won't be so tired that he needs to sleep in class anymore.
Oh, Mama, you see Mama go, here's how this is going to go. Are you ready for this, kid? Because this is how this is going to go. We let you police yourself, and we see that did not work well. Now we're going to police you, and you've lost trust, so now you're going to have to build it back. So that's some phrases at our house a lot.
Go ahead.
So I'm just curious. I mean, when that kind of situation happens in your house, and you guys are pretty much on the same page about it, you have a conversation with your kid, you kind of handle the situation. Do you feel like after that's over, are you just like, I'm so tired? Like, doesn't that put a strain on even just you guys?
It
Even
just
when
makes
you
you
agree.
sad to go, oh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
I want you to have fun. I want you to have good things. Oh.
And now we're all kind of in this like weird funk the rest of the evening
Yes,
because
absolutely.
this was not a fun thing that we had to do.
No.
One of the things I've watched happen over the last few years that I think has been healthy for us is once those situations have happened, if we're having dinner again as a family, to to bring it up a little bit more and more like a fun way. Like the other night, our oldest one was talking about how we responded when we're frustrated with them, and it was really funny. So he acts out this whole scene, but it kind of diffused that because you feel like that this big rock has been dropped on your house. And, and we work at Orange where everything's about, great families and great parents and great marriages. And there's all these, social media tiles with all these platitudes on them. And so you're walking around with this guilt all the time, inspiration all the time. We want to do this well. And then you have these situations that you're glad are not on video because I don't think Orange would probably post it if it was. So you're feeling bad about that. You wonder, did I handle this right? Did I handle this like my mom would have handled it, my dad would have handled it, or did I handle it in the way that that I should have? And so you're sitting in that, you're wondering, because parenting is such not an exact science. And the older they get, I think the more that's true. I mean, what about you? You started off with having a 12-year-old?
He was 12 when we got married. He's 14 now. And I think that was probably the hardest part is that, like, when stuff like that would happen, we all have to deal with it, all three of us. And then it changes just the climate of the house for the rest of the evening. And I think that's what's so hard is you come home, you've had a hard day at work, you want to relax, and now your kid screwed up at school, and now home doesn't feel like a fun, safe place either. And then even when he goes to bed, now it's like, okay, 9 o'clock's his bedtime, so I have to make it to 9 o'clock. And at 9 o'clock, I have to try to like compartmentalize that situation so that now me and Hudson can just relax and be each other, be with each other. I think that's what's kind of hard for me is going, we had to go through this together as a family, and now we've still got to work on just relaxing with each other,
Even when it's you and Hudson are on the same page, and just like Nancie and Ted's, example, they were on the same page, but just the fact that they have to parent in this way or have work through these situations, there's still a challenge there. There's still a strain there. So what do we do with that, Ted? What do you just push through and hope that they all get out of the house at some point and hold your breath until then, or how do you protect your marriage in the midst of that?
That's what we'd say. Is you have to protect your marriage from parenting, really, because after you said it perfectly, it's a climate change, and it creates a climate, and you're feeling a little bit guilty that you didn't handle it well, or whatever that climate is, and you're exhausted, right? Like you're just so taxed relationally that you don't have a lot to give each other. I think the great news is we don't have to throw our hands up and say it is what it is. That there's a couple of different things that, again, what do we always say on this podcast? We want to make it real fun and simple. But there are a couple of things that I think that we can apply to these situations that's been really helpful for us, and hopefully will be helpful for people listening.
Awesome.
So I think the first one is just having mutual respect for each other. We say this a lot, submit to each other out of reverence for Christ. Like, I'm not submitting to her based on her behavior, but because on Christ's behavior to me. I mean, we bring this up a lot of episodes, but I think it's having a respect that both of you are bringing different things to the table, because I don't think any one parent has all the answers. And I think when we are balanced, the fact we are so different, that you can bring a balance to parenting that you never could on your own.
That's great.
So it's really respecting, Nancie is going to bring a more linear way of talking about school. She was valedictorian. And so she loved to brag on her about that, because she worked really hard for that. And she's a really hard worker and very, very responsible. She has really brought that to our kids, that I hold you to high standards in this regard. So I've come to really, really appreciate that about her, and seeing that in our kids. Like, we travel quite a bit, and what we'll get from our family that comes and stays at our house with our kids is we really didn't need to be there. And they've told us that for years. They got themselves up, they got themselves ready for school, they got their lunch, they even kind of told us what to do. And that is from Nancie Lowe, right? And so she has brought that to the table. So I think there's a mutual respect of what the other one's bringing.
Absolutely. Last year was a super, super, super hard year parenting. And there were so many times in the middle of it that I would look at Ted and go, if we didn't still like each other in the midst of all this, I can't imagine. I can't imagine. And so there was a lot of, I think, respect going on during that time of going, I mean, it just was awful so awful at times, and you just had to have the other one's back. In big situations, I tend to minimize and just want to do the least amount because it freaks me out. And when it's and Ted is the best at just fighting through and coming to the rescue and going, no, this is what we're going to do. And I just would have to shut my mouth a lot of times and just go, okay, this is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. But in the end, I think just the going, I really like him. At the end of all this, I really like him. And if we were at odds in the midst of this, I don't know how we would have survived.
And that's where so many parents find themselves. You know, I work with middle school and high school students, and you know, so oftentimes it's like it's those super challenging parenting seasons that end up fracturing families because they realize that this parenting thing is like this is getting nuts, and then in the midst of it, they realize that they're starting to dislike each other more and more and more, and that's when families tend to explode. You know, it's those difficult moments that really reveal what's going on in your marriage too.
Because these times can cause you to fight so much because we can get our angst out and our frustrations out on each other. It's so easy because we're not going to do it with people at work. You know, we may lose our job. You know, we're not going to do it with our really close friends because they'll find a new friend. But we can tend to do that with each other. And we've talked about this on the podcast before. It's because we can. And I can do this and I can lose it. And the problem with that is it is like putting, you know, fuel on a fire that's already there. It's like stirring up even more chaos. And so you can either draw together or it can let you push you apart. You know, I never see this more the case than when you see, and we've talked about, again, this, parents who have children with autism, and you see this, that they can really take it out on each other. Yeah. But then you see the other extraordinary couples who have said, no, what's best for the kid. You know, and kids are very sensitive already. You know, kids with autism are really, literally more hypersensitive to what's going on. So they're picking up on even more cues. And so you see, well, what's really best for the kid is mom and dad to get on the same page. And I think, wow, that's so true for every marriage is we need to be on the same page. Kids are picking up on it just from a pure parenting standpoint. Kids are picking up on this thing. Are they on the same team? Because we get so frustrated with kids, but they're so unsure and they're so insecure and they're figuring out and they're teenagers and they're growing a person. I mean, what's going on in their body chemistry is crazy. And so they're kind of leaning in and they kind of need us to be the rock even when they're driving us crazy.
And so what we're talking about here is to defend against some of that. I mean, it's one, to actually like your spouse, like Nancie was saying, and then there's another level to it, and it's to respect your spouse in the midst of all of that frustration, having your spouse's back, and kind of approaching those situations together. So what's the next big idea to keep in mind here, Ted, to protect our marriages from parenting?
And this is probably, you know, a no-brainer, but it's something that we've got to make time for. It's just time to talk. There has to be a time that's not right off an incident. That's, you know, because, again, what's going on in body chemistry when we're frustrated, I mean, our frontal lobe's checking out, our body's being flooded with cortisol. I mean, we are just not in a good state to think. And that's the only time, a lot of times couples will talk about anything is when they're frustrated, including parenting. So when are those times where your body's even neutral? You know, your body chemistry is neutral, that you can talk and say, okay, let's talk about these things. Because it's amazing what couples can talk about on different retreats and things because they're not in the middle of a fight. And they're so funny because they're so surprised they can have these conversations. But what would you say, Nance, on the talking part?
This is kind of a joke, and I think it frustrates our kids, but they know that we're going to back each other up. Whatever your dad says, that's what I say.
Whatever mom says.
And whatever mom says, that's what I say. And I mean, it's almost like a joke. But I think for them, it takes the angst out of, ooh, I need to work the other parent because I can possibly change their mind. Like, it's kind of like, that angst is gone. But I think by talking before things, by just knowing to go, this is what we're going to do, I think it saves the grief down the road of having the conversation with your kid or with each other of going, oh, I thought we were going to do this. No, we were going to do that. Just getting it out, it just saves a conflict later.
It does, getting on that same page.
So let me ask you this, bouncing off of having conversations, because it feels like, whenever we talk about like going on dates or it feels like usually when we talk about talking to your spouse, we're like, try to not talk about parenting, don't make it about your kids. Don't make it about parenting, make it about you and your spouse. So what have you guys done to kind of like protect your time to get on the same page as parents, but then also protect your time of like, let's not talk about kids and just be ourselves with each other too. And just talk about our each other.
Yeah, great question.
Yeah. Well, I think the talking allows, when you talk all those things out and you talk about, you got to go through the checklist of you pick this kid up and you do this, different things.
Yeah.
When you talk that out, when you do have time together, you don't tend to get caught up on that. You have this space that's just for the two of you.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, and I'm sure y'all have covered this in other podcasts, but like sometimes the being together is not talking, it's watching a movie, it's just together. It doesn't even have to be solving the world or where would be our favorite vacation spot if we had $1 million. I mean, like all that fun, cool stuff. But sometimes it's just brain dead, and just let's just me and you be brain dead together and allow each other
It's
that
the
moment.
watching You've Got Mail on Valentine's Day, right?
Right.
After,
There you
and
go.
that's y'all's thing, right?
Exactly right.
There you go.
I even said to her last night, we were both really tired, and I was, in the family room, and she was in the dining room. We're both on our computers, and I said, "Can you come in here and just be on your computer? Like, we don't need to talk." And men, this is very true, and this is stereotypically for men. A lot of times, men's idea of quality time is just literally just being together. It's not always talking. Again, it's not always the would you rather questions. And I think a lot of times women don't understand that that's important to him. And maybe sometimes the roles are reversed even in that way. I'm probably more the talker than Nancie, but it's just, I think it's being together, and it is making time to do stuff that you really like to do. I remember last year, and we're being vague about what went on with us last year, just out of respect for our oldest son, but he was going through a really, really tough time that was really scary, that was devastating to our family. And so I just remember in the middle of that, I saw this advertisement for a Dirty Dancing 30th year showing.
I'm so interested to see where this is going.
Okay. All right. So it's the 30-year anniversary of Dirty Dancing, and they were doing a show of it at a movie theater, and I got tickets. And again, you guys, we are in the middle of just a tough time. And I'll let you finish the story.
Well, it's just funny. It came the picture time hop or whatever this time last year. And we had such a good time. It was such a good time. But when I see stuff from a year ago right now, I'm like, oh my gosh. Like, good for us for going to see Dirty Dancing in the midst of all that. But it mattered. It mattered that we went. We don't have to just live in this every day. We can still be me and you and still have fun and still like each other and be okay with each other, even if all this crazy's surrounding us.
Well, and I've had to be protective of her over the years. If we're saying, how do you protect your marriage from parenting? I think sometimes you're protecting your spouse from your kids sometimes. Like, I remember on that, it was like, unless you're bleeding, do not text your mother during this movie. Last night, our daughter was like, I need mom to quiz me on these things. It's 10 o'clock at night. And I went, not tonight, you don't. Tonight, you're going to quiz yourself. But I got to do it. No, your mom's exhausted. You're not going to ask mom to do that. And you could tell it was frustrating with her. But I think it's protecting each other and just saying, you got to give mom a break.
Protecting your spouse from parenting a little bit there.
Absolutely. I've never heard you say that, but that is good. Yes, to go, who else is champion for the mom? Nobody. If she's not champion for herself, she's just doing it because you just do. You're just the mom, and, well, that's my job.
Well, I've heard Andy Stanley say this before. He goes, we don't have many rules at our house, but one of them is respect your mother. And that's, I think it's true when I say, if you want to push my button, you be disrespectful to her. That's when I turn into, I hear my dad starts coming out of my body. I tell you what's about to go down right here. You do not talk to my wife like this. And I get all southern on them, but it's those moments of going,
Even more Southern than you already
Yes.
are.
Even much
Yes.
more.
That is-
Exactly.
we go deep south.
We go deep south like
We're
this
about
right
to
here,
go deep
boy. I'm gonna
south.
tell you what we about to do, boy.
You just go full on redneck.
And my dad, I'm about to tear you out the frame. Hey, boy, I'm gonna tear you up. Did you ever get to I'm gonna tear you up?
Oh, totally.
Yeah, we both came from that.
Okay, this is funny, just random, but a comedian that we were with a couple of weekends ago said this line, and I thought, that is so true. It's sad and funny, but it's true. But he was having a moment, and his kids were not being kind to him, and his joke says, I looked at all of them and said, your mom, she's the only one I chose out of all of you. And I just thought, we kind of need to live like that, to go, you are the one I chose. Like, I knew you and chose you. You children, you came out like you are, and I have you.
Yeah.
I
But
have you.
I choose.
Right.
So,
I like that. I like that. And we really are the first generation where parents' world revolved around children. I mean, the whole concept of parenting is not even 100 years old. People had children. You just had children. They were farm hands.
Yeah.
So now there's this.
That sounds good.
This pressure of, isn't that great? I
Yeah.
just had you to do work around the house.
Yeah.
That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, like I had you so that you can mow the lawn.
Yeah.
So I don't even know why you're arguing.
Not
Like,
because-
this is what you're here for.
You are the
this is your
lawn
life
mower.
purpose.
But it's just but we have become the helicopter parents and the hovering over them, and just to say more than anything, and this is research, this isn't just me, like you look, and what kids need again is that mom and dad are solid, and I can't get between them. Nothing can get between them, not even me. And so I just even from a parenting perspective, what's the motivation of your marriage being good? If you said, I just want to have a good marriage so my kids will have a good marriage, because they're going to have our marriage probably. They're going to bring that into it. The question is that a good thing? And I always say from people that are just one of the most controversial things that ever happened on the Oprah Winfrey Show of all her years. Do you know
so
what?
happy we're talking about
Are you-
Oprah right now.
Do you know what she said was one of the most controversial issues ever? Was when a lady says that I love my husband more than I love my children. Now, that may be weird and extreme. I don't know if she said, I put my husband first or whatever. But you think that concept in our culture is offensive. How could you dare say that? But I kind of liked it. I kind of liked it to go, you know what? We're going to be together a lot longer. Now that we're about to have one that's going out of the house, you're going, wow, people need to do the math. You're going to be with each other way longer than with these kids,
Yeah,
right?
that's true. So how do you, this is just off the cuff here, but how do you keep your marriage from revolving around your kids?
I think Ted totally leads the charge on this. I can tend to get caught up in tasks and things that we need to do, or things I feel like we need to do. And he is so great, and has been for years and years, of going, we need to go on a date. Hey, let's go to the movies. Hey, will you just come in here? This is a thing he does. Hey, will you just come in here and be my puppy? Which means will you just sit? You can read your book and I won't talk to you, but will you just sit on the couch with me and come be my puppy? I mean, he is so great about that. And I think almost 23 years into it, and through some hard times, I think now we're reaping the reward of that, of all these years of him pushing and prodding and sometimes dragging me along. But I think now to go, oh, that's good you did that. Thanks.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
And and then you like each other. That's the thing. We had great models too once we got married. Like, we had great couples in our life that really, 10, 11 years down the road, who just modeled date day, basically. They had worked in church. He had Mondays off, and he and his wife would just spend time together, especially once the kids were in school. And so I think we always saw that. And now that we've done that, it's like, you've been putting all these credits into the bank. And now when we had one of the roughest years ever, we had something to draw from, and then decided to keep putting money in the bank in terms of relationally. And it has mattered.
All right, Ted. So you've talked about respect, and then we talked about talking, and you kind of just led right into that last one, which was time together. So those are the three, what would you call them, principles, or just the takeaways to help protect your marriage, right?
Yeah, like what you go, okay, wow, how do we do this? Because I think sometimes in the sea and the chaos of parenting and being married, there's no clarity. How do we, pause and clear things? Go, okay, despite the situation, there's some common things that we all can do that's going to matter. And I think, again, the respect, it's got to be based on that. Okay, we're going to start with respecting each other. We're going to have different opinions. Great news is we're going to balance each other out probably. The other is, just talking, having that neutral time. We're going to talk about this not just when we're in the middle of the chaos, right after we got the email, and then just having that time together, which this is ours. This isn't, I love having time together as a family. Dinner together is great, but this is me and you time, and having that. It's key.
It's the date nights, the movie nights, the working out together, and just making sure that part is solid and good so that when you have those challenging parenting moments, they don't derail your marriage because you already have those deposits in the bank. Right. So, Ted, we always like to wrap up with one simple thing. So one simple takeaway, because these are 3 big ideas.
Sure.
So what is the practical next step? So one simple thing that married couples can be doing this week to implement this idea?
Yeah, well, I think it's that. I think it's pick one of these. Is it when you start running the lens through maybe your last fight about, parenting or whatever, run it through the lens of what do we needed? What would have helped that situation? Were we not mutually respecting each other? Did we not talk? Are we only talking when we're angry? And are we having any time right now? Like, what's your lens to go, oh, wow, we really haven't been hanging out at all lately, or we really haven't made time? Because when you're frustrated and you have a lot on your calendar, there's not a natural tendency to go, hey, let's add one more thing. Let's pause. I mean, we're not wired that way. So I would just say those lenses.
So, Afton, because your situation is completely different, because you became a mom to a 12-year-old, so you did not have the history of the first 12 years with him.
No fuzzy feelings.
No fuzzy feelings. It was just, here you go. And 12 is not the greatest age.
It's right when they're getting smelly.
Yes.
It's like right when they're getting really smelly.
Oh, and they're losing any sort of social skills they may have had as a kid, and they're not developed as a teenager. It's just that awkward time. So how do you and Hudson do that? Like, did y'all have conversations, or is it just evolved? How does that work?
I think really like we married 2 years, and I feel like the first probably 8 months we were married, I just always deferred to whatever Hudson said. Like I tried not to, and they kind of tell you this, like I read a lot of like step family and like stepmom books, and it's like, don't come in too strong is basically the advice. Don't come in and be like, I make the rules now, which was hard for me because I can't
imagine that being difficult.
I love the rules, and my rules are right. I mean, my rules are like way more right than Hudson's rules. But I mean, when there were things that I was like, I feel like he should have like a bedtime, or like, I feel like we shouldn't do video games during the week because it's causing a lot of, arguments more than we need. I think I came in, and then Hudson and I would kind of have our own conversations, and I'd go, I feel like we should just make a rule of like no video games during the week, and especially no video games during the morning since he's missed the bus 3 times this week, like things like that. And Hudson was always really receptive, and we'd, have conversations at dinner with Julian and go, hey, we feel like if we put these in place, it's going to make things easier for everybody. And that always originated with Hudson. Like it always kind of had to originate with him where he was prompting those changes to happen. But I mean, now we're at the point where 2 years in, Julian knows he needs approval from both of us if he's going to do something. And he knows I'm the harder critic. So normally he'll ask me first, like,
Because you have them full time most of the time.
we have them pretty much all the time. So like now, it's like, is it okay for me to like go to the mall with my friends? And I'm like, well, I mean, what are you going to do? Like, what are you going to do there? And Hudson isn't really as much of an investigator. So he's like, oh yeah, the mall sounds fun. And I'm like, well, I want a little bit of information. Like, I just want like basic information. I try to be like super cool about it. Like I have this shirt from Mean Girls that says, I'm not a regular mom, I'm a cool mom. Because like, I try to be like really sly about my parenting. I'm just like, oh, that's cool. Like, so like, are any girls going to be like at the mall? Like, what are their names? Like, what's the deal? Like, I try to make it not so mom and kiddish and more like let's just have a conversation. But I mean, Hudson and I are still trying to figure all this out. I mean, as you guys are talking, I'm just kind of like, I think our most challenging thing right now is like when you're going through challenging seasons or you don't know what the right answer is in this parenting situation. I think I personally can let it like weigh on me longer than Hudson does. Hudson can like deal with the situation. Julian might be angry with the answer and he'll go to bed angry, and then he moves on. And I'm kind of still like in that like, that was hard and I don't like that all of this just happened. And then it's hard for me to just be with him and have fun or just relax. So I think we're still trying to figure that out where it's like, how do we make time where we just hang out or we just talk and it's not about the situation and it's just like to just be people. I think that's the hardest part for me and him is just finding time to just be with each other.
I love that, just to be people. The parents, we kind of forget we're people a little bit, right? No, I love that. That's a great, and I think moms, on side parenting note, moms just have a gear that dads don't. I mean, like Nancie just has this gut in her. And I think all moms, stepmoms, grandmoms, whoever it is, there's this gut that, at the risk of being stereotypical, that just feels like men miss. We live in this real general sense. We compartmentalize too so easily. And moms are like, whoa, wait a minute.
And I think to tag off what Afton said, like, when stuff like that happens or conflict, it just blankets everything for you personally. And it is hard to go, oh, okay, now let me be a fun wife. Like again, like it kind of ruined my day and I'm kind of done. And I just, meh, like that's how you are. And so it is hard. And just, if I could say, then maybe there's one in the relationship that more it blankets them or kind of affects their day to just go back to one of those steps of just being respectful to go, oh, it kind of ruined her day. And I don't, my expectations of her right now or him just need to be lowered because, she had to deal with the whatever.
Going back to what you were saying, Afton, I do think it's interesting that in all that you just shared, you're like, I just find that Hudson and I we just need time to be people. And that is a reflection of one of the three things that Ted just brought up, the time together. You call it something else. Let's just time to be people. But like that thing that you walked into today, not knowing what these three steps were, that thing has been in you, like we need that, is validated by some of the stuff that Ted's bringing up. Like that's a good thing, pursue that because that's going to help protect your marriage from parenting. And it's not just a selfish, like, I'm just hate parenting and I want some time without, so like, no, that's healthy. That's good. Go after that, pursue that. I think that's neat.
And it's really true for like any couple, because it might not be parenting that makes your life so hard. It might be, a family dynamic or whatever it is, whatever kind of challenging season you're in that makes it hard to just be people and like remember that you just need to really cling to each other. And I think for me, that's like the thing that I try to remember most is like when you're in those challenging seasons, like Hudson's not my enemy, he's on my team. And to remember that he's on my team and fight for me personally to remember that he's on my team, because he'll always fight to be on my team, but I will always, it's easy to skew it and go, I'm frustrated at him, now I'm frustrated at you, and you're all against me,
Right.
And it's hard to remember that, like, we're on each other's team. And I think that's kind of what I try to remember in those times is, like, we're on the same team, we're just not on the same page right now, and we need to get on the same page.
That's a great way to say it.
That is a perfect way to say it. We talk about a lot, when we do marriage events about if you're a parent to make sure you're encouraging your spouse that they're doing a good job as parenting, because we're always wondering, because the kids aren't saying it.
That's true.
The 2-year-old's not saying it. The teenager's surely not saying it. To say you're doing a great job. Nancie came in. Our oldest and I had a discussion. It didn't go so well. And Nancie walks in afterwards and goes, "You're a great dad, and I really don't like him either." And so it's like one of those fun moments. It brought some humor to it, but it was just, I needed that.
Yeah.
Our oldest one had a car accident, and it was, it was awful. I mean, he was totally fine, but it was the scene that I drove up on was not fine. It was police car and ambulance and the whole thing, and it was awful. And then we're dealing with insurance and all that stuff afterwards. And then we're saying, when can he drive again? I mean, it was yuck. And she sends me this text, and it says, and I loved it. It says, "You may not be feeling like the rock on the inside, but that is all it's showing on the outside." And it was like muscle, finger pointing to muscle. And it was like, wow, this is when we say making marriage simple. That moment is all I needed. I just needed those few sentences, and I was like, that's wow. And it made me want to become the rock. I mean, literally that little text. And that's what, as people are going, what's the one simple thing, man? Maybe it's just to encourage your spouse, that they're doing a great job as parenting. Hey, we may not see eye to eye, but I know you love the kids so much, and you're trying so hard. I know you've got such a great heart for them. And just like you said, after so perfectly, going, wait, whoa. We're on the same team.
It's kind of like at the airport when their tagline is like, "If you see it, say it." Like, I kind of try to remember that, because
That's
it's
really
like,
good.
That's good.
When I witness Hudson interacting with Julian, or just having a dialogue with him in a way that I never could, or just in a way that was really helpful and moved things along further when it could have been a fight. It's later, it's hey, you did a really good job having that really hard conversation. If you see that it happened and it popped into your brain, you did a good job with that. It's easy to just go, he probably knows he did a great job, because look at how great the situation ended up. He knows it ended up great, but it's just saying, hey, that was a hard conversation to have, and you did a good job. I don't even think I could ever have done that. It's if you see it, say it.
Yeah, that's great.
I love that. That's a whole episode. Let's do a whole episode around that. And I'm 100% serious, because you are right, especially if you're not the verbal one in the group. Well, because Nancie and I have talked about it before. My love language is, words of affirmation. She's like, "But I've said that," or "I thought you knew that." And I'm like, no, I need it to actually come out.
And every day.
Yeah, and every day. But you're acting service, and I have to do that every day.
I know. And we've learned.
Yeah.
A
That's
whole
another
episode based on marriage advice from the
TSA.
Yeah, from the TSA, from the airport.
That is awesome.
See it. Say it.
Oh, man, that's great.
Things you shouldn't pack into your baggage, your carry-on baggage.
There are a lot of
These are hazardous materials. Don't bring them into your
lot of
marriage.
metaphors. The threat level is orange today.
We're going to have a pat down right now. Maybe do a little strip search. Just saying.
All while having a really bad attitude. Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
funny.
Well, Ted, you mentioned just a minute ago, maybe your one simple thing is just to see something and say something to your spouse, maybe about their parenting specifically. But do you have any other takeaways for this? Because we do always like to boil all of these big conversations down to one simple, practical thing that couples can do this week.
I kind of love Afton's better than anything I was going to say.
Okay.
I kind of love that. I think because we talked about, we need to mutually respect each other.
Yeah.
We talked about, making time to talk and having time together. And I think that whole idea of see something, say something, that communicates a lot of respect. It communicates that they're better at something than you are. It communicates the communication part. And I'm imagining we tend to want to spend time with the people that are affirming us and believe in us. So I think
That's great.
Yeah, Afton was way better.
Yeah, we had on our notes, you had a different one simple thing, but we are
100%.
punting on
I
that
just hijacked it.
because
No.
Afton.
Another plane reference, way to go!
We're doing a really good riff on all of the TSA jokes.
Our producer just went, I think that's that
Can't say
line.
that.
Yeah, Robert, our great producer, is our discernment fiber around the table. Hey,
Can't say
so
that.
can we not say hijack?
I think we leave it in. Let's leave hijacked in. Oh, that was great, Afton. You hijacked this one simple thing, and it was great. So, If you see something, say something. If you're listening to this at the airport, that's great. If you're at home or in the car and your spouse is around, that's great too. Well, as we wrap up today, we want to hear from you. What's one thing that you do to protect your marriage from parenting? And we would love to hear your thoughts on this. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Just search Married People and we'll pop right up. You can also check out our website, marriedpeople.org/podcast, and leave your thoughts there. Well, Nancie, thanks for joining us for this.
Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure. We have to bring you back. We need to bring her back on an episode where there's no agenda, so we can just ask her a million questions.
I know, right? That's true. You are the first spouse that we've had on the podcast.
Oh, then
here.
no, maybe the other spouses need to come in before I make a repeat performance. So that's going to be.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
I think so.
I do have a lot of questions about Ted that I think we need
and I'm
to
pretty
get answered.
transparent about
hearing
it.
one
so.
side of the story, so
Oh, yeah.
we need to.
But he
Dude.
usually paints a pretty good picture for me, way more than
I mean,
reality.
we need to know what happens when he really puts on a scuba suit. Like
Yeah.
we need to know what's going on there.
yeah.
That's
I don't know that's ready for the
well.
Steve.
This was a lot of fun. Thanks for joining us for this conversation, and thank you for listening to the Married People podcast. We hope that today's episode helped you realize that marriage is a little easier than you think. And if you enjoyed today's episode, we would love for you to subscribe to the podcast through your podcast app. And while you're there, we would love for you to leave us a review. Your review helps us make this podcast better and helps get these conversations in front of more married couples. And finally, for more great resources to make your marriage better, check out Ted's book. It's called Your Best Us, and you can find it on Amazon or on our website, marriedpeople.org. Until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Afton.
I'm Nancie.
I'm Ted.
And thank you for listening.